and finish up section 1, 19, 20, and 21. Chapter 19. If the wonders of the world hadn't stopped at 7, Cobble's knot would have been number 8. Nobody knew how it got there. As the story goes, the original Mr. Cobble wasn't doing too well with the original Cobble's Corner grocery at the corner of Hector and Birch. In his first 2 weeks, all he sold were some Quaker Oats and penny candy. Then one morning, as he unlocked the front door for business, he saw the knot. It was dangling from the flagpole that hung over the big picture window, the one that said Frosted Foods in icy blue and white letters. He got out a pair of scissors and was about to snip it off when he noticed what an unusual and incredible knot it was. And then he got an idea. He could offer a prize to anyone who untangled the knot. Publicize it. Call the newspaper. Winner's picture on the front page. Cobble's Corner in the background. Business would boom. Well, he went ahead and did it. And if business didn't exactly boom, it must have at least peaked a little, because eons later, when Maniac Magee came to town, Cobble's Corner was still there. Only now it sold pizza instead of groceries. And the price was different. It had started out being 60 seconds alone with a candy counter. Now it was one large pizza per week for a whole year. I wouldn't be mad if the pizza was good. Which in time made the knot practically priceless. Which is why, after leaving it outside for a year, Mr. Cobble took it down and kept it in a safe place inside the store and brought it out only to meet a challenger. If you look at old pictures in the 2 Mills Times, you see the knot was about the size and shape of a lopsided volleyball. It was made of string, had more contortions, ins and outs, twists and turns, and dips and doodles than the brain of Albert Einstein himself. It had defeated all comers for years, including J.J. Thorndike, who grew up to be a magician, and Fingers Holloway, who grew up to be a pickpocketer. Hardly a week went by without someone taking a shot at the knot and losing. And each loser added to the glory that awaited someone who could untie it. So you see, said Amanda, if you go up there and untie Cobble's knot, which I know you can, you'll get your picture in the paper, and you'll be the biggest hero around and nobody will mess with you then. Maniac listened and thought about it and finally gave a little grin. Maybe you're just after the pizza since you know I can't eat it. Amanda screeched. Jeffrey, the pizza's not the point. She started to hit him. He laughed and grabbed her wrist. And he said, okay, and he gave it a try. Chapter 20. They brought out the knot and hung it from the flagpole. They brought out the official square wooden table for the challenger to stand on. And from that moment, Maniac climbed up. And you could tell the knot was in big trouble. To the ordinary person, Cobble's knot was about as friendly as a nest of yellow jackets. Besides the tangle itself, there was the weatherings of that first year when the knot hung outside and became hard as a rock. You could barely make out the individual strands. It was grimy, moldy, crusted over. Here and there, a loop stuck out, maybe big enough to stick your pinky finger through. Pitiful testimony to the challenger who had tried and failed. And there stood Maniac, turning the knot, checking it out. Some say there was a faint grin on his face, kind of playful, as though the knot wasn't his enemy at all, but an old pal just playing a little trick on him. Others say his mouth was more grim than grin, that his eyes lit up like flashbulbs, because he knew he was finally facing a knot that would stand up and fight a worthy opponent. He lifted it in his hands to feel the weight of it. He touched it here and touched it there, gently, daintily. He scraped a patch of crust off with his fingernail. He laid his fingertips on it, as though feeling for a pulse. Only a few people were watching at first, and half of them were Hex Angels, a roving tricycle gang of 4- and 5-year-olds. Really? Most of them had sneaker lace or yo-yo knots untied by Maniac, and they expected this would only take a couple seconds longer. When the seconds became minutes, they started to get antsy, and before 10 minutes had passed, they were zooming off in search of somebody to terrorize. The rest of the spectators watched Maniac poke, tug, and pick at the knot. Never a big pull or yank, just his fingertips touching and grazing and pecking away like some little bird. What's he doing? Somebody says. What's taking so long? You going to do it or not? After an hour, except for a few more finger-sized loops, all Maniac had to show for his trouble were the flakes of knot crust that covered the table. He ain't even found the end of the string yet. Somebody grumbled, and almost everybody but Amanda took off. Maniac never noticed. He just went on working. By lunchtime, they were all back, and more kept coming. Not only kids, but grown-ups too. Blacks and whites, because Cobbler's Corner was on Hector, and word was racing throughout the neighborhoods on both the east and west sides of the street. What people saw, they didn't believe. The knot had grown, swelled, exploded. It was Frizzy Globe. The newspaper the next day described it as a gigantic hairball. Now, except for a packed-in clump at the center, it was practically all loose. You could look through it and see Maniac calmly working on the other side. "He found the end," somebody gasped, and the corner burst into applause. Meanwhile, inside Cobbler's was selling pizza left and right, not to mention Zepp's, a 2 meals type of hoagie, steak sandwiches, strombolis, and gallons of soda. Mr. Cobble himself came out to offer Maniac some pizza, which Maniac, of course, politely turned down. He doesn't like pizza. I think he's allergic. He did accept an orange soda, though, and then a little kid whose sneaker laces Maniac had untied many a times handed up to him a 3-pack of tasty cake butterscotch crimpets. After polishing off the crimpets, Maniac did the last thing anyone expected. He lay down and took a nap right there on the table, the knot hanging above him like a small hairy planet and mob buzzing all around him. Maniac knew what the rest of them didn't. The hardest part was yet to come. He had yet to find the right routes to untangle the mess, or it would just close up again like a rock and probably stay that way forever. He would need the touch of a surgeon, the alertness of an owl, the cunning of 3 foxes, and the foresight of a grandmaster in chess. To accomplish that, he needed to clear his head, to flush away all distraction, especially the memory of the butterscotch crimpets, which had already hooked him. In exactly 15 minutes, he woke up and started back in. Like some fairy tale tailor, he threaded the end through the maze, dipping and doodling through openings the way he squiggled a football through a defense. As a long August afternoon boiled along, the exploded knot hairball would cave in here, cave in there. It got lumpy. It got out of shape, saggy. The Times photographer made starburst with his camera. The people munched on Cobbler's pizza and spilled across Hector from sidewalk to sidewalk and said, "Ooh," and "Ah." And then, around dinner time, a huge roar went up, a volcano of cheers. Cobble's knot was dead, undone, gone. It was nothing but string. Last chapter of part 1, chapter 21. Bugles, caps, guns, sirens, firecrackers, war whoops. Cobble's Corner was a madhouse. Traffic had to be beep and inch through the mob. Kids cried for autographs. Scraps of paper fluttered down in a shower of homemade confetti. A beaming Mr. Cobble handed up a certificate to Maniac for the year's worth of large pizzas. Maniac accepted it and said his thanks. The undone knot lay in a coiled heap in Maniac's feet. Mr. Cobble grabbed it. Already people were guessing how long it was. It turned out to be 4.5 blocks long. Someone tied it to the stop sign and started walking, and that's how far he got before it gave out. The yelling went on and on the way yelling does, it only to hear itself. But only person wasn't yelling was Amanda Beale. She was holding one of the homemade confetti scraps, gaping at it. Then she was scrambling across the sidewalk, the street, shoving people's legs aside, grabbing more scraps, crying out, "Oh no, oh no." And then she was running. Maniac saw. He leapt from the table. He picked up a scrap that was printing on it about Africa. He picked up another, and this one mentioned ants, another Aristotle. The Encyclopedia A. He followed the scrap paper trail up Hector and down Sycamore, all the way to the Beals' front steps. The only thing left of the book was the blue and red cover. It looked something like an empty loose leaf binder. Amanda was hunched over, rocking, squeezing it to her chest. "It was my fault," she sobbed. "I got careless. I left it in the living room. Anybody could look through the window." And she clenched her eyes so tightly it was a wonder the tears got out. More than anything, Maniac wanted to hug Amanda and tell her it was okay. He wanted to go inside, be with his family in his house, his room, behind his window. But that wasn't the right thing. The right thing was to make sure the Beals didn't get hurt anymore. He couldn't keep letting them pay for such a price for him. He turned and headed up Sycamore. Maybe the man with the can of worms' voice was right. Back to your own kind. Back to your own kind. He never got farther west than far curb of Hector Street because McNabb and the Cobras were there to meet him. Grinning, leering, hissing, "Yo, baby, we hear you got a little pizza prize there." Come on back. We missed you. We've been waiting for you. So he turned and started walking north on Hector, right down to the middle of the street, right down the invisible chalk line that divided East End from West End. Cars beeped at him. Drivers hollered, but he never flinched. The Cobras kept right along with him on their side of the street. So did a bunch of East Enders on their side. One of them was Mars Bars. Both sides were calling for him to come over. And then they were calling at each other, then yelling, then cursing. But nobody stepped off a curb. Everybody kept moving north, an ugly, snarling, black and white escort for the kid in the middle. And that's how it went. Between the curbs, smack down the center, Maniac walked, not ran, right out of sight. And that's the end of part one. And we're about to start part two.